Everybody, happy Thursday. Today we are going over the last big chunk of Easter symbols and traditions. I saved all of this for the last day because it is the biggest amount of information. Also, you do have at the end of this, you'll have a quiz to do. But of course, as always, you can come back, watch the video, do whatever helps you do the best. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Today has a lot of information, so you definitely want to pay attention closely. All right, so today, of course, is day 3 of Easter symbols and traditions. So earlier in the week, we've talked about some different things. We talked about the Easter bunny. We talked about Easter eggs. That was what we did yesterday. And we talked about Easter baskets and treats. If you remember, the bunny kind of represents new life, new beginnings. Same thing with the eggs in a way, because we talked about how, baby chicks hatch from eggs. Eggs kind of represent a new stage in life. And we also talked about how we got to a point where we color or dye or paint eggs, and how where that came from, which was a tribe in Northern Africa, which I thought was really cool. I did not know that. And then, of course, we talked about Easter baskets and treats and how that started kind of as a way of rewarding kids for good behavior, and how we still do that tradition today. So all of those things, the Easter bunny, painting and dyeing Easter eggs, Easter baskets and treats, those 3 things, we all do those things still today. Or you probably do at least 1 or 2 of those things. You may not do everything. So today we're going to talk about some traditions and beliefs about Easter. So I want you to take a second and think about what a tradition is. We've talked about symbols. We've talked about images. I want you to think about traditions. All right. So what is a tradition? A tradition is something that people do. They may do it every year. They may do it once a month. They may do it every so often. Regardless of how frequently they do it, it is something that people do as a way to mark something, like a holiday or any other kind of special day. So a tradition might be something as simple as something we did a few weeks ago, which is wear green on St. Patrick's Day. You don't really have to do anything for that, but that is a tradition that people wear green on St. Patrick's Day. Other traditions are things like giving presents at Christmas. That's a tradition. Eating cake on your birthday, also a tradition. You don't have to do any of those things, but people started it and it just continued and still continues as in most places today. So I want you to take a second, look at these pictures. Do any of these things look familiar? These activities, I say activities up at the top, but not all of these are activities. So you've got some different pictures here. You've got a cross, you've got a family, looks like they're sitting down for a meal. You've got a church, you got some eggs that have been dyed or painted. I've got some flowers, more specifically lilies. We see that little girl in the pink shirt or red shirt that is picking up Easter eggs. And then lastly, on the end, we have the mom and her 2 little girls that are dressed up in looks like brand new outfits. So we're going to think about how we see some of those things on Easter. I'm sure most all of you have seen at least one of these things or done at least one of these things at Easter. You may have dressed up. You may have dyed eggs. You may have gone to church. You may have eaten a big meal with your family or gone on an egg hunt. Those are just a few things that people might do to celebrate Easter. So let's talk about why people do them, or maybe where it started. because for some of those things, we don't really know why it started to begin with. So each picture on the last page displays a tradition or belief about Easter. So let's list what we saw. We saw some dyed painted eggs. We saw a church. We saw people dressed up. We saw the egg hunt. We saw flowers. We saw a family dinner, and we saw a cross. So we are going to talk about how each of those things is linked to Easter in its own way. So the first thing, of course, is the dyed eggs. We talked about eggs a good bit yesterday. We talked about the history of the Easter egg, how it got started. We talked about how in some places people almost like trick or treat with Easter eggs. But we know that the Easter eggs represent new life. They represent things being renewed. So think of spring, think of how flowers grow again, the trees have leaves again. Think of how things come back in the springtime. Eggs may be dyed, which just means that there's like either some kind of chemical that's got a color that goes on it. They may be painted. They may be covered in stickers. I've seen eggs that are covered in stickers before. So you can see how some of these eggs are solid colors, like that blue and that purple one. And then you got some that have different colors on them. So really, a dyed egg can be really just about any color. It can have any design, and it's okay because that is the point of dyeing and coloring eggs. So many people attend Easter services at a church. So even if someone doesn't always go to church, a lot of people go to church on Easter, even if they don't normally go during the rest of the year. So some churches have different services. They might mark Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and of course, Easter Sunday. Easter's always on a Sunday. That is according to Christians when Jesus came back to life after dying, which he died on Friday. And so that is where we get these different services and how these churches have different days that they do different things and mark certain things. Okay, now we got these two little girls. They are in some cute, fancy little outfits. So wearing a new outfit on Easter is a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. So I'll be the first to say, when I was little, my mom always would get me a new dress or a new outfit for Easter. And I'm sure some of you probably have gotten new outfits for Easter as well at some point. It kind of goes back to representing, again, renewal, new life, things starting over. And then it also represents a respect for Easter, since most people most often wear those those nice new outfits to church. So they might be wearing them out of respect for Easter and for the holiday and going to church. All right, so egg hunts. These are things that I'm sure most of you have done at some point. You have done an egg hunt. Egg hunts started in Germany. I did not know that until I was researching. They started in Germany, where men would hide eggs and have the women and children hunt them. Why did they start this? Well, it was sort of as a nod, meaning it was kind of in honor or in out of respect for the Bible story of the women who found Jesus's grave empty, because that is the story that women found it. And so that kind of is a nod to it, that these women and children are hunting something, and that is where that tradition sort of kind of started. Now, Easter egg hunts are usually use those plastic eggs. There's usually candy and prizes inside because, of course, we know some people celebrate Easter that do not celebrate it for religious reasons. So these are not always held because of religious reasons. Lilies and flowers represent new life and second chances. So think about the flowers and how in the summer and in the spring, they're bloomed and they're pretty. And then in the winter, they may kind of go away, or you think they're dead, but when it starts getting warmer again, that's when those flowers start to come back and bloom, and you start seeing the second chance or the new life of that flower. So many people eat ham on Easter. I know my family eats ham on Easter. I'm sure some of your families do. This is a tradition that's also hundreds of years old. People would eat ham because it was easier to save and cook in the springtime. That's kind of weird, but this was a time before we had refrigerators, before you had freezers. Ham, which is pork, is easier to save, and cook in the springtime. And finally, we had the cross. Christians who celebrate Easter for religious reasons likely will have crosses as decorations, or maybe at church, as a way to remember the sacrifice of Jesus' life. A sacrifice is when you give up something for somebody else, to benefit somebody else, or to make something good for somebody else. So those are just a few symbols and items that people associate with Easter. Again, we've talked earlier about the Easter bunny. We talked about Easter eggs in general. We talked about Easter baskets. We've talked about all kinds of things that have to do with Easter. So from here, you have a short little quiz on all of the things we have talked about this week when we talk about Easter and the symbols and traditions that go along with it. Good luck on your learning check.